Hey, Brent, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again.
Hey, Sean. Good to be back.
All right. I always appreciate you guys giving us this insight into your polling, and I know the audience does as well. I want to get to the latest on affordability, the generic ballot, all that kind of fun stuff. Venezuela, you got some great stuff in there. Before I do that, though, you've got a brand new book out, and what I find fascinating about this new book, it's called America's Emotional Divide, and it talks about how you guys do polling. And it's fascinating because I'm obviously very interested in the book, but one of the things that I find fascinating about how you guys at Cygnal do things is one of the ways that I've been looking at the electorate differently is I think in most of the time in politics we're like, how are Republicans going to take this issue? How are Democrats, et cetera? I feel like this last election broke the mold, that there was a lot of young men that voted Republican for the first time, young people, but young men in particular. There were Hispanics. There were blacks, particularly black men, that voted for Donald Trump and aren't necessarily lifelong Republicans. They were basically saying, hey, we're with you this time. Show us the money. Show us what you're going to do for us. And then we'll see if we come back to you. But we're not with you for the long run necessarily. We're willing to give you a shot. How's that?
It's exactly right. In, I think, April of the election year, we identified a group in our polling called the ticked off young, diverse working class voter. And that is exactly who you're describing right there. And so we dug into this group to figure out who are they, what makes them tick, and how are they going to vote in this election. We conducted focus groups. Among them, we did a lot of open-ended verbatim research. That's where we just ask a question and they get to respond in their own words to it. And then we take that and put it through our heartbeat process to really understand the emotions behind all of it. And this group is, to your point, they're not ideological, right or left. They really don't see themselves on a political ideology spectrum. But what they do know for a fact is that the institutions that were built for their parents and grandparents that have served them well not only don't serve them, but are keeping them from opportunity. And it's this frustration and this complete distrust in institutions. And then you throw gas on that fire of social media and fragmentation where everybody's seeing their own version of the news. And you find yourself in this place where people are willing to do things that really break the mold. The question is, do they break the mold again and go the opposite direction because they don't care about Republicans? They only did this because they wanted to see change, not just economically, but culturally too. And there's not an insignificant number of voters who pulled the lever for Donald Trump in this audience in 2024. And then last year voted for avowed actual socialist Mamdani in New York City.
And that's what I think that traditional consultants, et cetera, are getting wrong, is that they're looking at this like, oh, they came over to our side. And I don't mean to use this like in a disparaging way, but I feel like they rented. Like they're like, we're not buying, we're renting. And we'll be there.
Flirted. We didn't even date.
Right. Okay. Even better. Yeah. It's like a one. Yeah. And that's what I think is that they're constantly like, show me what you got. Like, I'll come back to you, but if you don't, and the way that you describe the institutions is so critical to me, because they're like, I keep hearing this over and over again. Like, people are confounded. Like, how do you vote for Donald Trump and then Mamdani? And the answer is because they just want people that think the system sucks and that it's broken and that are willing to throw mud at the wall and say, all right, I got an idea to fix it.
Well, and that's a lot of the reason that you see Donald Trump taking these broad, home run, grand slam type swing actions right now, is because he realizes that the people who matter in this next election and the people who mattered in 2024 are not looking for incremental change. They are looking for drastic, systemic, radical change. They don't care if the institutions burn down. That probably is actually better for them. And so they know that these institutions and the way government works and the way Congress operates does not change on a hairpin. But what they want to see is that somebody every single day is empathizing with them, that the system sucks, it's against them, it's holding them back, and that person is going to be fighting the system for them. And it's a really great binary construct that goes outside of the right and left construct. And it puts Democrats on the defensive because they're going to reflexively do exactly the opposite of whatever Donald Trump says. So making them the party of the status quo, making them the party of defending these institutions is going to be the path forward. But we have to keep them on their toes, and we have to do so by empathizing every single day with the plight that these voters are feeling.
All right, guys, if you're looking for that amazing snack, then you got to do what I do right now. I've gotten into Masa chips, all natural, 3 ingredients. That's right. Corn, seed oil, and salt. That's it. Crunchier, tastier. These are Maha approved snacks. You are not going to regret it. My tip, get the variety pack. Go to Masa, M-A-S-A chips.com, masachips.com/Sean, S-E-A-N, for 25% off. That's masachips.com/Sean. Use code Sean for 25% off. Okay, so let's break down the latest Cygnal poll that came out. I don't think it's a huge surprise. The number one issue, 20.2%, top issue in your poll, was the inflation and economy. Walk me through what that means, though. Like the inflation numbers came out this morning, 2.7%. It's not bad. I mean, I think this gets back to, this is a great segue from what we're talking about. The traditional person says, hey, inflation 2.7, that's not a bad number. What is though the average American saying about, like, I think, and frankly, a lot of politicians are like, hey, that's not a bad number. But for a lot of Americans who are going to the grocery store or whatever, they're like, the rent is still too damn high.
Yeah, we should definitely bring that party back. That guy in New York City years ago was on to something with the rent's too damn high party. Just very simple, very empathetic, says what people are feeling. When I look at that 20% of folks saying that inflation and the economy are the top issue, and it's been dropping, a year ago was in the 30s, but even still only in the 30s, that voters, when you logically ask them what matters most, they have different reflexes to what that means. But if you're younger and you're lower to middle income, that number's a lot higher among that audience. And it's the group that we started this segment talking about. Then you throw in healthcare, which is 15%. And 20 years ago, when I started in this business, healthcare really meant accessibility. And right now it means affordability. So I put that in as another pocketbook issue. And then there's a very right-leaning issue of government spending and waste at 14%. I also lump that in as a pocketbook issue because the more government spends, the less regular people have and the more they have to be taxed. And so I don't look at the inflation issue as the sole, that's the one affordability concern. Because when you ask questions along the lines of, what is causing you the most stress, you hit the nail on the head. It's groceries. And why is it groceries? Because every day or every week or every few days you're going to the grocery store and you're like, Lay's are really $7.50 now for a bag. I mean, I remember when they were $1.99 and now they're $7.50. So it's that constant in your face reminder that yes, even if inflation, according to a government stat, is showing that things are decreasing, it only matters people's perceptions.
That's right. I mean, I say this all the time. I walk in, I don't know, it was a few months back and I was buying a couple lemons, like a little lemon in my water. Okay. And it was like 79 cents a lemon. I'm like, are you nuts? Like that's ridiculous, but it's very visible. And to me, suddenly that became the proxy for everything. But there are certain things. Sometimes it's milk for some people, gas prices for other. I mean, I'm a big gas prices guy myself, but like there are certain in your face number prices that do this. But like we're in a midterm. Trump's in Detroit today talking about affordability. He put out the credit card cap the other day, clearly trying to get something to resonate. But if you were talking to like both the White House team who's got a State of the Union coming up and the House Republicans and saying, here are 3 or 4 things that you could talk about or champion that would address the concerns, like what would that look like?
Well, it would be starting out with, I know it sucks and I know it's expensive and I'm as pissed off as you are. And I'm here to blow up the systems that caused this for you. Don't make it about Jerome Powell personally, make it about the Fed. And voters are a lot more open to hearing some details than I think politicians give them credit for. When you put a little meat on the bone, it adds more credibility because that's one of the challenges that exists with current communications is there's almost no trust. And so if you just make a statement and say something, you don't back it up with anything, people are going to be questioning that statement in general. So that's the first thing is being empathetic and put a little meat on the bones. and then make it about these institutions and make the Democrats own these institutions that caused this. We can no longer blame Biden for inflation. He is long gone at this point in the mind of voters, and he was long gone, into his term too. So as we look at how do you communicate this, it really starts out with the empathetic piece, because if all the indicators show that the economy is doing well, and the strong majority in our case, 2/3 of folks saying that it's not doing well, then there's a complete mismatch of perception. And if you can't come to the same place on perception, then they're not going to listen to anything else you have to say.
Okay, so you start with the empathy. You've seen the president talk about cap on credit cards. He wants to stop institutional investors from buying up first-time home ownership. But what are the okay, so you got the empathy piece. What's now the policy suggestions that could help get people to say, wow, you're getting it? What are the institutions that I want to blow up or talk about being to blame?
Well, the second one's easy. It's any and every institution is the one to blame. I look at the fight. I actually wrote something today about the Fed and the fight with Jerome Powell, and how that could be a win for Donald Trump if handled properly. But if it becomes a tit for tat against two people, it's a complete lost opportunity. So I don't have the answers on policy. That's not my job.
All right, but okay. So let me ask you this way: the president talked about capping credit cards at 10% interest. I think that may resonate with a lot of people who are like, I remember, I joke, I had a Cygnal credit card. It was maroon, my first credit card in college. And I think it had a 28% interest rate. But I get why he did it, but I also go, would they have given Sean Spicer a credit card at 18 if they didn't get to charge some kind of interest? There was a little hedge. I guess what I'm getting at is it better to be throwing mud at the wall and saying, I got these ideas, I'm working on it, or is it better to be maybe more precise on the policy?
You have to have a boogeyman. Otherwise, you're the boogeyman. So taking and making these institutional investors, who I'm pretty sure own less than 1% of housing, in some areas it is a lot higher, like a Murfreesboro, Tennessee, compared to Nashville itself. These credit card rates, you throw it all at the wall and see what sticks and what gets legs. It's how we ended up with no tax on tips that actually became policy, because Donald Trump was standing at a podium in Las Vegas, threw that out there, and that became a rallying cry. So it really is his style to throw things at the wall, in addition to the fact that you get rapid feedback, because people aren't going to hold on to a policy as much as they are you thinking about this as much as I am? And the simple fact of throwing out policies and throwing institutions under the bus shows that he is thinking about every single day the things and concerns that they're thinking about. So the policies don't have to be, I'm gonna put this on Truth Social, and this is what we're gonna run with, and Congress is gonna pass the bill, or I'm gonna sign an executive order on it. It really is essentially market research. He's doing my job, but at scale.
So how has the issue of the inflation and economy changed since the last time you guys were in the field? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? Where is it headed? Because I know there's a lot of economic folks that believe that the second quarter of this year is going to be on fire. So it's almost like they're telling people just hold. Things are going to get better. Is that what the polling seems to indicate?
There's been a degradation since this summer in belief that the U.S. economy is doing even decently. And then we always ask a follow-up question, what about your personal economy? And there's a delta between the two, but the delta is less than I would have expected this go around. So the national mood is sour from an economic perspective. We have to take this into consideration. COVID starting, 6 years ago at this point, that people have just been oppressed over and over and over again. Think about the cost of buying a home. You're mentioning grocery prices, milk prices, gas prices. I agree with all those. I think we've had an inflection point within the last 12 months of two major expenses just drastically getting out of reach, and that's healthcare premiums and housing cost, especially if you want to go buy a home. A $400,000 house costs more than $1,000 a month more than it did because of interest rates. So this fight that Donald Trump is making with Jerome Powell, which he should be making with the Fed, not with Jerome Powell and the institution, is a good fight to make. And I fully agree with the economic boom that we're likely to see later this year. My concern is that it's going to be unequally distributed. And the voters that we started this segment talking about aren't going to be experiencing as much of the benefit from it as the people who own assets.
So, for example, I mean, again, I know you're not like, but I've suggested that, the VA has a phenomenal program for veterans, right? Maybe they really focus in on a first-time homeowners policy or young persons where they give them a path, whether it's the amount for down payment or a loan program that maybe helps them get to home ownership.
Well, by what home is the question? If you look at what the average square foot was of a house, a starter home in the 1950s, it was right at or under 1,000 square feet. You can't go find a home that fits that definition anymore because these municipalities and regulatory bodies have set up structures to where basically the smallest home you could go buy a new home is 2,400 square feet. Well, obviously that's going to cost 2.5 times more than the starter home in the 1950s, even inflation adjusted. So this is where I go back on the housing piece is who's the boogeyman? Okay, yes, that's a solution on the VA side, but who's the boogeyman as to why you can't afford this? And that's where Donald Trump and the Republicans can go after these local governments and after these regulatory bodies and push the message and make Democrats go defend these entities that have driven up the cost of housing, not just the interest rates on it.
But don't people want a solution, right? So that's the boogeyman. Now, Donald Trump goes out there and says, hey, the city council of Alexandria in Virginia has made these ridiculous zoning regulations, and they're driving up the cost. And my answer as a voter was, okay, and what are you doing?
Yeah, but go back to Mamdani in New York City. Nobody believes that transportation is going to be free. Nobody believes that housing costs are going to go drastically. But he said all the things on these policies, and people are just looking for, again, I feel like a broken record, the empathetic aspect of it. You're throwing out ideas and then you accomplish some of them. They are forgiving as long as you make them feel like you're still in their corner.
But see, the thing, this is what you just said, I get, okay? Mamdani goes out there and is like, look, I'm going to give everyone free groceries. We're going to control your rent. The buses are free, all right? And no one with a brain actually thinks that's going to happen, right? But they're like, it sounds good. And then what's going to happen? He's going to say, sorry, I couldn't do it. That was ridiculous. The city council didn't let me, whatever. I think Trump's the opposite, right? He goes out, he proposes no tax and tips. You said it, and he gets it done. I think it's almost antithetical to him to say, I'm going to propose a bunch of crap that I know isn't going to happen. And so the question I have for you is, I get you're just telling us what the polling is, right? So I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm like, there's two avenues here. One is just bowl the voters over, tell them happy talk to make them feel good, get by the next election, or actually present real policy prescriptions to the extent you can.
It's all the above. And I think that's what Trump is doing right now. The problem comes in when all of a sudden we're talking about taking Greenland, which I don't disagree with. I do believe that our national security under Obama and Biden specifically was totally eviscerated, and Trump has a lot of problems to fix. That is one of the catch-22s that the Trump admin finds themselves in right now. They are having to fix many systemic expensive problems. It's not easy to get the military back on track. It's not easy to get our hemisphere back in a place where we can secure and protect ourselves. That is one of the number one functions of government, but it's also the very last thing on a top issue question right now. So it's not, are you tackling these things? It's what are you talking about the most? And the Venezuela piece, the Greenland component, the Iran, even all of these things can be affordability conversations. The challenge comes in when the media decides that that is what is going to be 80% of what is broadcast out there, and it crowds out what Trump is doing. I do see light at the end of the tunnel, though, in the fact that Treasury Secretary Bessent, he laid out this plan for us in his first month on the job. We're going to do a whole lot of things that are not going to be fun, tariffs, other items that are going to cause turmoil. But by the end and by the middle of 2026, we're going to see the fruits of this. And thankfully, these ticked off young, diverse, working class voters, they're sort of paying attention right now, but they're really not. We put on our survey a news attention question. How much attention do you pay to the news regularly? And then where do you get that news from? And it's really helpful to look at that survey crosstab and realize that, okay, we actually have time to get some of these policies in place that people can tangibly feel, even if they're not huge and transformative, because the majority of people who are going to decide this election aren't going to tune in until September.
Since you brought that up, tell us, like, what do we need to know about where people are getting their news? Because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves on Minnesota, because I want to finish this affordability piece. But it's been shocking to me. Like, if you wake up every day and listen to the Today Show, read the New York Times or CNN or Politico or whatever, you have a very dystopian view of where the world is right now, and that, like, the government's trying to attack you and kill you versus and everything's to hell in a handbasket. Walk us through right now who gets news where.
Well, let's start with who's paying attention to news the most. And if you are older or if you are college educated, you're way more likely to say you pay a great deal of attention to news about politics specifically. And that scales up with income too. So the higher up the income scale you are, the more likely you are to pay great attention to news. And then as we transition to where are those people getting the news, cable news is the number one by far for folks over the age of 55, which is about half of the midterm electorate falls in the age bracket 55 plus. But if you're under the age of 55, and you can just imagine this scales higher as you go down the age scale, they're getting their news from social media. And when you look at where Democrats getting their news, 52% are getting it from broadcast news. Republicans, 48% are getting it from cable news. So you begin to see that there's not one pervasive news story. And yes, maybe the mainstream news can start a narrative, but it's going to filter through. Everybody's in their own information bubble now on this. And you and I find ourselves a lot of times in the Washington, D.C. news information bubble of what people are thinking and talking about. It's one of the reasons I try to intentionally click on X posts of people that have 2,500 followers in Wichita, Kansas, because I want to know what normal people are seeing and thinking too. I don't want to just see what is being fed to me by the algorithms of big tech and by the mainstream media, whether that's print or online or broadcast journalism. But there's a huge partisan aspect to this. And I think that's one of the main drivers of why when you see a story like Minnesota, let's go ahead and transition there on the ICE raid, that these older boomers, I mean, I took my kids to a skate park here in the DC area on Sunday, and there were tons of protesters parking their cars to go stand on overpasses here in the area on the Beltway and protest ICE. And not a single one of them was not the ideal audience for Depends.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.